Welcome to Trinity Radio. I'm Braxton Hunter, and along with me is
Jonathan Pritchett
with a new and outstanding Pritchett Cam. However, today it's not just us. Today on the Christian channel that loves atheists, we are talking with someone. We're going to be talking with someone who is a close friend of our school, close friend of mine and of Pritchett's. He is a pastor. We've worked with him many times, but he's more than a pastor. There is a term that floats around called the pastor scholar. That is a pastor who is also very scholarly. And Dr. Chip Bennett, PhD, is certainly that.
Yes, and I do want to give a big plug for his. Now he's got several things available on Logos, but there's the Plato's Republic from a Christian worldview thing that you got there that everyone needs to go check out.
And just so our guest's mixer guy knows, we're still getting a little bit of an echo, apparently, the crowd is saying. But while you're fixing that, I'm going to go ahead and say that the reason I put on the thumbnail that this man is got bad news for atheism is because there are two things you could do that would be problematic for atheism. One of those things would be to create an argument that would serve as powerful evidence for the truth of Christianity and all that sort of thing. Or since we're having a problem with young people leaving the church, and not just young people, but people leaving the church, you could get it from the other end by stopping that problem. And we have a man today who is tackling that, maybe both of those problems. I'm going to bring him on the screen now. This is our friend, Dr. Chip Bennett, pastor of Grace Community Church in beautiful Sarasota, Florida. Chip, welcome to the show.
I'm so glad to be here. I just want to say to both of you all, it's an honor and a privilege to be on Trinity Radio. I appreciate both of you all, what you do. Give a quick shout out to both of you guys. You both are scholars as well. You run a great school. I think if anybody's thinking about pursuing a theological education, they should consider Trinity. You guys do a fantastic job. You have great teachers, great scholars. Just really honored to be here, Braxton and Jonathan, and I hope that our time together here will be fruitful, especially for the listeners that are probably curious about what we're going to talk about.
Well, I so appreciate that, Chip. That's how we initially met, is through some background relationships there through schools and things like that. But I'm so glad you're here because for those that don't know, you don't just have a church, pastor a church that has grown dramatically. And I want you to talk about that. But on top of that, you have been teaching in higher education, and you've decided recently we've got to do something. We've got to create a resource. We've got to create a ministry. We've got to do something that can stop this bleed, that can address this problem of young people walking away from the church and engaging skeptics who might come into the church. And so the reason I brought Chip on, so that everyone knows, is he has the resources, the staff, the place, the actual geographic location, and some of the equipment to have a really powerful presence on YouTube. And so I've been sharing some of his videos around. Today he has a video interview with Jonathan Pritchett that came out. There's one from earlier in the week with me in it, but there's other exciting people coming. In fact, I'll just go ahead and while we're chatting here, I've just thrown up some video of that, Chip, so people can kind of see. There you are talking to the beautiful Jonathan Pritchett.
Yeah, with the theme of Chip Bennett being a problem for atheism, wanting to talk about his church, I have to get this in here because it's kind of funny. And Chip, correct me if I'm wrong, but the story goes as I was told. Didn't a non-Christian and perhaps even an atheist help you start your church?
Yeah, actually, that's true. I initially started off in ministry right after college, and then I got out of ministry, and I ended up working in the professional world for 18 years. I was a part owner and general manager in a Land Rover franchise. We also had Lotus, and basically was successful in the business world, even though I got out of ministry. And I'd been in ministry, I'd gone to school, I had credentials, but I just, like I said, I'd been one of the guys that got burnt out at church and just decided I didn't want to be in church anymore. I don't know that I ever gave up on my relationship with God per se, but I definitely was done with doing practical ministry. And so the majority owner in the dealership, who was not a believer at all, I mean, in any way, shape, or form, he came in one day and said, "Hey, I'm going to buy you a church." And to be honest with you, it was like, I don't even know what to do with that. So I set him down and shut the door to my office and said, "Listen, you can't buy a church and somehow atone for all the sins that you've done in your life. It doesn't work that way." And, he was just determined to buy a church. And that's actually how Grace Community Church started. It didn't, a lot of people, they plant churches, and, they get people together and pray and go over to a town or a city where they want to do this thing. And then they do it. We just started with some guy that was a non-believer that just bought a church. And we started August 1st of 2010. I remember I played guitar. I led worship. I took up the offering and I preached. And I got to be honest, it was crazy because we only had like 15, 20 people. Most of them were my kids because we have quite a few kids. And so it was, and I remember he came up after church service and he said to me, "Boy, I made the biggest mistake I could have ever made." And I was like, "Really? What was that?" He said, "I should have listened to you preach before I bought a church because you're terrible." And, so that's how we started. And, it's one of those things where, I look back at the start of Grace Community Church and there is just no question. I mean, even my general contractor that builds a lot of the buildings that we've built, because he knew me from the automotive industry, not even convinced he's a believer at all. He always says to me, he says, "There's no question in my mind, somebody upstairs is looking over what you're doing because of all the things that are going on." And so for me, there's no question God has just been so involved in Grace. And Braxton, as you said, we've been so fortunate. The last 3 years, we've been one of the top 100 fastest growing churches in America.
Listen to that, folks. I don't want you to miss that. Top 100. He's in the top 100 fastest growing churches in America. So this is a church that's doing it right. I've been there. They have at least 2 locations, and both of those locations probably seat about 1,000 people, right?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, we have 2 wonderful locations. They both seat, I think one seats probably 1,100, one seats comfortably 900. That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So why did you decide? So you decided to put together a YouTube channel where it's going to have a lot of it is focused. You're the MC at least, and you're the teacher or speaker for much of the content. That is to say, if you want to start taking a systematic theology class right now, but you don't want to go to seminary just yet, you can go to that YouTube channel right now and start listening to that material. But so this is not just, this is about reaching the next generation. This is not specifically just apologetics, but obviously apologetics is part of that. And so, Chip, you've been interviewing a lot of exciting people that our audience would know about. I don't know how much you want to say about that or how much of that is super secret. So just talk about that a little bit if you want to.
Sure. Okay. So, I guess, and I don't want to make a short story long, but I definitely want to try to at least give some context behind what's going on. When we first started Grace, I don't even know that I could say that I had a desire really to do ministry again. Here's a guy that's not even a believer at all. And, I guess I felt like I just needed to do this. And so as we started doing this, as we started going through the church, as we started doing things, people would come to me and say, "Hey, maybe you should write a book. Maybe you should do more stuff or whatever." I just didn't feel like it was time. And now that we've got both of the campuses together and we've, done what we've done, my heart for the local church has always been there. I mean, Paul says that Christ died for the church, and in Ephesians 5, and it's just been a big deal to me. And the more I've talked with people and the more I've seen what's going on, and especially, the rise of what we call the nuns and the duns, and then the rise of atheism in the world that we live in. I just felt like, I need to do something, and if you know me, Braxton, but most of your viewers don't. And so everybody's going to read you through a grid, and they may say, oh, well, he thinks his church is growing fast, or he thinks that whatever. I mean, if you know me, I'm not a very arrogant person at all. I'm only saying that because it's true. But I have a heart for the church, and that's really where this is coming from. So I sat down and I started thinking, what can I do to help pastors, leaders, Christians, small group leaders? What can I do to help them help the church? And so this reaching the next generation started to become something that was sort of, going on in my mind and my spirit. And we thought, let's do this. And so the YouTube channel is sort of multifaceted. It's got an academic piece to it, because I do believe that if a lay person or a pastor or a teacher doesn't have enough depth to understand what they believe and why they believe, then they need that. And we actually today, this morning, we started a homiletics class as well, helping people learn how to preach and teach and putting those things together in ways that are helpful for them. So there'll be the academic piece to what we're doing. The other part of this is podcasts. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to bring people on that can speak to different areas of the problem that we have in the church, which is the church is in decline in America. And I don't say that with any type of excitement. I actually say that with remorse, but it's in decline. And I feel like we got to do something about it. And we've got to give answers to people. We've got to give answers to pastors and teachers and leaders to be able to answer these questions. And we need to be able to answer questions for the people that don't go to church, or for people who don't believe or marginally believe, or maybe they're agnostic. They don't know what they believe, or maybe they're full-fledged atheists and all of that. I feel like that we have the answer. I feel like that Jesus Christ is truly the answer to people's problems. And unfortunately, we've sort of gone off on political bents, and we've gone off on, moral arguments, or we've gone off on, how to tell everybody how to live their life. And for whatever we're doing is not working. I mean, I feel passionately to say that the American church is not doing a great job of what it should be doing. And so this channel has got an academic piece. It's also going to have a podcast piece, which is where we'll bring in people like yourself. I've got Frank Turek coming in this weekend, and he'll be on the podcast as well. I think a friend that John McCrae, he'll be coming in. And I know these people are more of the apologist side. We also have pastors that are coming in that have large churches that are reaching people. We'll have academics that are coming in. I've got a buddy, Del Coulter, who used to run the patristics at Regent University in Virginia Beach. So I'm trying to bring in a number of people to say, what do we do to help stave off the decline in the church? What do we do to help equip pastors, leaders, teachers? What do we do to give answers to people that are struggling? I saw somebody had said, hey, when are we going to get into talking about the problem of atheism? That's not like maybe the number one focus of what reaching the next generation is about, but it is about that. I mean, we have a rise in atheism. We also have a rise of Christians that are deconstructing and going into, unbelief effectively. And I believe that there are better answers than just deciding that I don't believe in Jesus because there's a couple of contradictions in Scripture, or because I see gratuitous evil in the world, or because pastors and leaders, many of them have done bad things to people, or the church doesn't always look like the church, and sometimes it's too political. I mean, honestly, most of the times when atheists tell me all the problems they have with the church, I'm like, me too. Me too. I got some of the issues that you have as well, but those aren't really the issues. There's a larger issue here, and we need to talk about that. And so this whole channel is geared towards giving pastors and leaders some help to effectively grow their churches, grow their ministry, and to provide answers and solutions to some of the decline that we're seeing in the church. I don't know if I made any sense on anything I just said.
And I want to draw some things out. First of all, I want to say that Punchbowl Haircut is here, He's one of our regulars, and he says, I'm proud to have been bestowed with the honor of being one of the people who says, what do you mean, at the end of John McCrae's videos. But yeah, so I want to say a couple of things. First of all, thank you so much to Jason Miles for your continued support. That means so much. And thank you, Chip, for the support you gave us today financially. I really do appreciate that. And you can ask Dr. Bennett questions if you want to about, I mean, between the three of us, we'll take just about any question that you can throw. And if we don't know the answer, we'll just say we don't know. But I want to say why this is important and what it has to do with hopefully, responding to this issue with atheism. And here it is. So right now, putting this aside for a moment, Jonathan and I are working with our local church to create an online interface that will be the place that when people come to Christ through Trinity Radio or Mike Winger or John McCrae or anywhere else, you can actually start going to church through this church, which means it will be a landing page. It will have a Facebook group with regular Bible studies meeting. When people go to that landing page, they will sign up. They will pick a Bible study that they'll be a part of as in a Zoom call or just watching. So we're actually looking, and there'll be videos there that will help them go further. The point is we want to actually create a church. We don't want people to stay there. We want people to ultimately get into actual physical church. But this is actually a good time, culturally speaking, to create an online church sort of a situation for people that are coming out of the online worldview discussions. So we are trying, Pritchett and I are actually trying to do something about the problem that we're talking about. And so is Chip. And Chip provides a piece to that puzzle that is another piece. So we've got that church piece that we're working on right now. Chip is developing, I mean, did you hear some of the names that are going to be involved in this? And the quality is as good as any Christian YouTube channel out there. I'm looking at you, Capturing Christianity. Maybe those are equal or close, but it looks great. The content is excellent. You're getting it from a PhD from Knox and the people that he brings on. Did you hear some of the names of people that are going to be involved in some way or other with this? He mentioned Frank Turek. He mentioned What Do You Mean, John McCrae. There are others I know about that I'm super excited.
We have Jeremy Camp, the Christian singer Jeremy Camp stopped by, did a podcast with us. That'll be forthcoming. And that's whole interesting too, because his whole thing is, as a Christian artist, he travels the country and the world and gets to hear what people are struggling with, what they're saying. So he had a really unique view when we talked about what can we do to reach the next generation. But we're really honing in on some, but it's not just about big names. It's about the content of what we're doing to help people to be able
Chip,
to, I mean, if I'm a pastor,
the reason I bring
if I'm a pastor,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Brandon. Bryson. I'm sorry.
No, what I was going to say is that that's funny. There's a little bit of a delay, guys, so that can happen. But what I was going to say is, it's not just about the names, but I'm saying here's a guy, and this is unusual for pastors. Here's a guy who has the influence and the affluence, frankly, the resources available to grab the best that there is out there and put them in one package together. And so when you're talking about solving this problem, there are very practical things. We talked about in my interview with him about a very obvious thing that can stop the bleed with people going and becoming nuns or NES nuns or going out into atheism is very clear in the handout on the screens, very clear paths to talking to someone if you're experiencing doubt in church. Can you imagine how great that would be if every church did that? Really practical things. So for those that came in late and you're wondering, what is the solution to the rise in atheism? Well, you may have thought we were talking about some big argument, and that's great too. That's what this channel's about. But what we're talking about primarily here is getting it from the other end, which is stopping people from walking away and providing them something worthwhile when they come into the church.
Yeah, one of the things that Chip mentioned and that we're talking about with his program, beyond the apologetics, beyond just atheists, which I think is like on the rise, but still the smallest group of non-Christians. You've got, when you talk to people who are outside of just these internet YouTube debates, when you talk to people on the street, most of their questions regarding Christianity or their criticisms really aren't the kinds of things that apologists typically talk about, especially in the classical apologetics tradition. They are mostly theological or biblical studies type questions. Has that been your experience? That those you get asked about various doctrines that people find problematic, Trinity, the doctrine of hell, or textual problems with supposed. Do you find that to be more what you're answering anyway than like, does God exist kind of questions?
Yeah, I think that when you're doing the academic side of apologetics, or you're a professor or whatever, there's a caliber of question that you get that is a little bit more on the intellectual side, and it would encapsulate textual issues or philosophical questions about God's existence, or any of those things. I think at the practical level of being a pastor and dealing with just what's going on in the church, some of that is there because with YouTube and social media, everybody can get everything right now. But I think a lot of people that are walking away from faith and walking away from God, the first thing that happens is there's something that makes them question God's goodness. There's something that makes them, it's usually a trial, a difficulty, a loss, a divorce, a bankruptcy, a loss of a child, something that's really tragic in their life that starts this process of, is there a God? Is he a good God? Does he care about me? Have I believed something that's not true? And then what'll happen is someone will go onto YouTube, or they'll go onto social media, or they'll get with a group of people, and they're out there that will start telling them, have you ever thought about this? Did you know this? It's almost like, I'm not trying to be Christianese here, but it's almost like the very first thing in the Bible is the serpent says, did God really say? There's that question of, is God's word right? Is there really a God? Are you sure that he said that? That doubt that comes in. And I find as a pastor that the doubt usually comes from a tragic event or something like that. And then they get into a community, or they find a YouTube channel, or they find somebody who criticizes something, and then that doubt starts to seep in. And before long, they've stopped going to church, that they've worked themselves out of a functional belief system. And then once you get into that echo chamber of where you're only hearing one side of the issue, and many times that's, atheism or quasi-philosophy or whatever it may be, it's very difficult then to get them back arrested because they're in that chamber. So what I'm trying to do with reaching the next generation is to give pastors and churches some tools to be able to deal with that person when they're still there, when they're struggling with this whole thing. I'm of the belief that struggling with your Christianity, struggling with doubt, questioning things is a good thing. Like, I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, and I know in a lot of churches, if you question something or you doubt something, people will say, hey, hold on, this is what we believe, time out. We don't want to talk about that. Just get in line. I want pastors in America and teachers and leaders to be able to go, hey, this is part and parcel of being a human. Atheists are not necessarily bad people. They're questioning things. Many of the atheists I know are good people. I mean, I'm a boater. You guys know that. And captain friend of mine listens to Matt Dillahunty. He says he goes to church every weekend. I mean, he listens to this guy. We sit and drive my boat and go places, and we sit and talk and debate and argue, and we love each other. Both of us really care about each other. He knows me. I know him. He knows that I obviously think he's wrong. He knows that I know that he thinks I'm wrong. But the point is that, it doesn't have to be this nasty stuff. You guys online, I see like people just jump onto your stuff and just go immediately to attacking you guys. It doesn't need to be
Really?
this
I've
way.
never
You know,
heard of
I
that.
know you guys. You guys are not bad guys. I mean, no matter what anybody says, you're not bad guys. And you're not doing this because you just want to collect some money or because you want to have enough likes or whatever. You're doing this because you really genuinely care about what you do. And I think the more that pastors and teachers in America can get very comfortable with questions and doubt and talking to people and realizing that there is robust discussion that can happen, but with the understanding that we have the answer. Like, we have a better argument. We have a more robust understanding of the world that we live in. I think that if people can get the help that they need, that we can stop this bleed. And then what we can see is what we've seen at Grace. We're not seeing a bleed at all. We're seeing growth. You know, at Grace, we're back already to our pre-COVID numbers and possibly a little bit better, plus an online group that was never there before. I mean, we baptized just a few weeks ago, like 32 people. And then a couple of months before that, it was like 25 people. I mean, people are coming to faith at Grace, but they're not coming to faith because we don't answer questions or because you can't talk about things. But what we're doing is we're actively involved in the community. We're out there making a difference. We're feeding that. We just today, my executive director told me that we have partnered with a local food bank. We are covering their entire budget to feed for the rest of the year, all taken care of. We paid for it. And people see that and they go, why would you do such a thing? Well, I would do it because my heart's been changed by a relationship with Jesus, you know, and so we want to do those things. We make beds for people so they can sleep on. We do all kinds of things. We're involved in the community, but we're not just involved. We're there to talk about why we do what we do, and we equip our people to be able to answer questions when they get them. And I said to myself, this model can be taken and it can be planted in other churches. It's not just Grace. So reaching the next generation is really my way of saying, hey, let's take this thing for real. Let's believe that the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. Let's believe that the church really is triumphant, and let's go out and make a difference in the community. And so,
amen.
You
and
know,
Chip, on top of that, you've created one of the great things about the YouTube situation is you've created a place for, say, I'm a pastor in Chitlin Springs, Alabama, and I know my Bible. I'm a good pastor, but I'm not like ready to like talk about Matt Dillahunty or argue for God's existence. So you've created a channel where where I'm that pastor, I can go there and I can send people there.
Right.
And that's great. But before you go on, there's a couple of questions here that I think would be good. First of all,
Sure.
Someone says, I find that more nuns leave the church because of a lack of demonstration of his existence, not because something bad happened to them. Well, let me just answer that real quick. And then I've got a question that I want Chip to speak to. And that is, some of you know that I did a 10 questions for atheists video that got dozens and dozens of responses. And one of the things that I heard the most during that is, you can have a catalyst like that starts people thinking, like you can have a catalyst like something bad happens in their life, like Chip is talking about, or maybe they suddenly realize they're struggling with same-sex attraction, or they get cancer, or whatever it is, some heartbreak happens. But then that can set them off asking the questions that get to the evidential stuff and the arguments for and against and all of that. But it's still important that many of the atheists I discussed with would say, no, there is a catalyst that got me started on this. And it could be any number of things like Chip has laid out here.
Yeah, listen to them tell their own stories on their own YouTube channels. And no, it's never only intellectual reasons and intellectual doubts that there's always something that happens. Was there another question?
Yeah, there's a question I have for Chip. I put it up on
the
screen here.
Yeah, there's a super chat too.
Eddie Morris. Oh, there's a super chat. Eddie Morris says, "Help me get respect again for the church. Taking orders from the government and shutting the doors has hit me hard." What do you have to say to someone struggling with something like that, Chip? Because I know you had to navigate all of that as a pastor too.
Sure. Was it Eddie? Is that his name? I
Eddie,
can't.
yep. Eddie.
My screen, I can't read anyway. I got bad eyesight, and my screen's real small.
There you go.
So his name's Eddie. I just want to make sure. I want to make sure that I address Eddie as a person. Not just as a. Here we are on YouTube.
Yeah.
Eddie, if I was talking to you as a pastor, first of all, I don't know you, and so I don't want to assume that when I read that question, I understand everything that you're saying in that question. So please forgive me up front if somehow I answer the question and I'm missing exactly what it is that you had specifically asked, because I can only read the text and how it speaks to me. I think pastors across America had to make a decision when the pandemic hit as to what we were going to do. And I think most pastors, as a general rule, and I want to say all of them, but most pastors as a general rule tend to try to honor local authorities and tend to try to honor local people that are set above us. I mean, sort of like the Romans 13 deal that, try to honor those that are in higher offices. I think that most of us, when the pandemic started, tried to say, hey, we don't know what's going on. We don't know the severity of where we're at. We don't know any of these things. And I think all of us were trying to meander through, what does this look like for us? Knowing that it was very tough, and knowing that ultimately we believe that the people gathering together physically is what we should be doing, not gathering online. Not that online is bad, not that we do it, but the point is that we wanted people back in church. I think what you have to do, Eddie, is rather than look at maybe the church or maybe some people that I think I would look at the overall American church, because there's so many pastors that once they realized what was going on, we opened the churches back up and said, hey, you know what, we're going to do our thing and realize where we're at. I think a lot of pastors did what you're probably hinting at, like, why did they not do what they needed to do? Why did they shut the doors? I think there were a lot of pastors that out of the gate tried to meander through this and then realized, hey, this is what church is about. And quite honestly, and I'm sure Braxton and Jonathan, you all know this, but I mean, a lot of this was litigious. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, agreed that during these times that the church can remain open. So in some ways, Eddie, the church won during this pandemic, not having to be shut again. But I can tell you here at Grace, I was trying to be a Christian through all of this. I mean, I had people that wanted to wear a mask. I had people that didn't want to wear a mask. I had people that thought this was a hoax, and people thought it was the end of the world. I had people that were Republicans and people that were Democrats. I mean, I had the whole deal. And what I did is I said, what can I do as a pastor to best honor trying to be all things to all people without compromising the gospel? And that's what we did. And we shut down for a small period of time, and we went online. We did the best that we could. And then we opened back up. When we opened back up, Florida had a massive spike in COVID cases. I mean, it was like the week we opened up, it went through the roof. And I said, let's shut down for another week, which I wish I wouldn't have done, but I did. And then after we saw what was going on, we opened back up, and we've been open ever since. What I would ask for you, Eddie, is to understand my heart behind what I did, and that I was doing the best that I could to be a pastor that honored God, that honored authority, that honored Scripture. And you know what? I made some mistakes along the way. I did some things that I wish I could change, but I don't think I sold my soul to the government, or I sold my soul to, trying to do what people told me to do. I tried to do it as a pastor. And my suspicion is that most pastors in America were doing the same thing I was doing, which is trying to walk that tightrope of what do we do. Unfortunately, the ones that got all the media attention were the ones that were either to one extreme or the other. They were the ones that we're opening up no matter what, and we don't care. And the other ones that were saying we're locking down, and any church that opens up is wrong. What I would say is maybe take the extremes and try to get past that clutter, and then come down to the level of where most of us were at. I don't think that you need to lose respect for the church over what happened. In fact, I think that in many ways, I gained a lot of respect for pastors during this time, because what I saw was men and women who were doing the best that they could to try to be Christians during this time. And it was tough.
Yeah, this was a situation that no one has been through before in this generation. So
that helps, but I hope that does help some.
Yeah,
I think it was helpful, and I want to thank Ralph Como. It's been a long time. I'm going to say Como because you've donated before, and I appreciate that, Ralph. But I feel like it's been so long since I've read your name that I may get it wrong. But I think it's Ralph Como, and thank you so much for that substantial super chat. Thank you so
and another
much.
one.
And while we're at it, I want to thank Angel WVM. He says, "Hey Braxton, I finished all the Genesis commentary videos. Amazing teaching, by the way. Are you going to do commentaries for the rest of Genesis?" Yes. I think I have, the way I have it scheduled out, there's only like 5 videos left. And I do need to get back on those. I will take it as confirmation from God, because you asked me this today, that I will get back on it. I'll try to have a new Genesis video out next week, and we'll try to make that happen. So
I've got a couple of tough questions here for Chip.
Okay.
All right. The first tough question. Okay. One of the top 100 fastest growing churches, but you had mentioned that you were baptizing over somewhere around 25 people here recently, and then a couple months before that, 30 people or whatever. So one of the things that I hear from pastors who are lamenting the fact that they have a church that's dwindling and all of this is, well, the churches that are growing, they're just picking off Christians from other smaller churches because you have brighter lights and bigger screens and all of this. How do you respond to that, at least from your experience?
Okay. So first of all, you all know me well enough to know that I'm a pretty transparent guy. I think anytime you have a larger church, you're going to have Christians from other churches that are going to be looking around. And there is some of the fact that you have a larger church, and so maybe it's a little cooler or whatever it may be. I don't think that is that's necessarily wrong. I don't think that's the entire argument, though. I don't think that's the fullness of what is going on. We're so involved in the community, Jonathan, and that's, I think, the biggest difference between maybe what we do and let's take a church that's smaller.
But y'all were that way when you were small too, though. Yes.
We were in the community from the very, very beginning.
Right.
Maybe this will help. I came to this conclusion in Acts 2. It says that the church was selling and distributing the things that they had and giving to everyone as they had need. And then it says they had favor with the people. And God added to the church daily those who were being saved. That's in Acts 2. I decided early on that we were going to be a church that was completely involved in the community, and we were going to have favor with the community. And we've had it. I've had plenty of pastors. I mean, a lot of pastors that have called me. We have this thing called Christmas on Main. So Main Street in Lakewood Ranch is a secular area. A lot of restaurants, high-end stores, really nice place. They do a thing every month called Music on Main, where they have 3,000-4,000 people come out. They bring out beer trucks and wine trucks, and they bring out secular artists and cover bands, and everybody's out dancing and having a great time and doing all the things that they do. We decided that we were going to get involved in that event. We were going to do something good. It took us a little bit of time to figure out what we were going to do. But we eventually started what we call the Grace Zone. And what we do is we take care of all the kids for Main Street. We have rides. We have rock climbing walls. We have all that. We don't say, we don't meet people with a sign that says turn or burn. We don't have get right or get left, or
now,
eat the bread of life.
Before you say anything else, Chip, let me just say, Godless Engineer, who happens to be a well-known atheist advocate on YouTube, happens to be in our chat right now, and he's talking with some people about the pandemic. But I just want Godless Engineer and people like that to just think for a minute about this. Can we find some agreement on this? If you were in downtown Sarasota and you were there for some event like he's describing right now, that's a lot of fun, you want to walk around with your wife, John. You want to walk around. You want to, maybe you want to get some drinks, maybe whatever. Wouldn't you love to be able to just leave your kid with Grace Community Church? And I think you would. I don't think you'd be
And
worried
you would rather leave it with Grace Community Church than a bunch of strippers who are trying to do the same thing now.
Okay, I
so
didn't say that.
I did. I mean, everyone knows that this is a good church with a good standing in the community. So even godless engineer types walking around are going to go. They're going to feel comfortable leaving their kids with these people who also give out food and whatever else.
They do though. We have atheists and non-believers that come by and say, thank you for what you're doing. We don't try to pull somebody aside and give them the Roman road. We don't try to, argue. We're just there to serve the community. But this is what I want to get at. In doing that, taking care of all these kids, and we have thousands of kids when we're doing this that come through. I think our budget's like $10,000 or $15,000 a month to do this. Here's the cool part. So I approached Lakewood Ranch and said, what do you think about us doing a Christmas candlelight service out there? Now, personally, I thought they were going to say no. But they said, you know what? You guys 11 months out of the year take such good care of our community and our kids. We're going to let you do a candlelight service. So the last candlelight service that we did, we had somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 people. We brought even in one time we brought in a what do you call it? The big circular thing that you ride on, a carousel, a Ferris wheel,
Ferris wheel.
We brought in a Ferris wheel that was 70, 80 feet in the air, rock climbing walls, petting zoos. It was like the greatest family extravaganza, free for everybody. Everybody wants to pay. Everybody wants to give money. Everybody says you can't. No, free. And then we do a Christmas candlelight service where we start off with some songs, like Grandma Got Ran Over by a Reindeer or something. And then we go into some Christian songs. And then I get up and I tell the story of Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay. They shut down the road so that we as a church could do what we do. You know why they did it? They did it because we had favor with them. And so my feeling is like a pastor who's going, I don't know how to grow my church. I think that all these large churches, all they do is capitalize on somebody else's sheep and all of this stuff. I would say, hey, I can't speak for every church. I can only speak for the one that I pastor. But I can tell you, most of our growth and what we're seeing is coming from the fact that we're out in the community. And even the Christians that decide to change venues, you know why they change? They change because they go, that church is actually doing something with the gospel, doing something to make a difference in the community, and we want to be part of it. So even the Christians that have come from other churches, and we've had that, their whole life has been revitalized because they're no longer sitting in a little group of people staring at everybody's navels and talking about stuff. They're actually out doing it. And our church, everything we do is related to mission. Everything. Even our groups that we do, our small groups. If you do an 8 or 12 week small group on the Gospel of Mark, one of those weeks, you have to go do something missional outside of the church. So it's just part of our DNA. In fact, our statement at the church says, we exist to reach the unchurched by being intentional neighbors that reflect Christ. Everything we do is through that screen. If we're not reaching the unchurched by being intentional neighbors that reflect Christ, then we don't do it. And so what I would say to somebody who's maybe struggling or has a smaller church or, feels like all these big churches, all they do is steal people or whatever. What I would say is, don't worry about them. Get in your lane, figure out what God's called you to do, and get outside of the four walls and preach the gospel, because the gospel is the power of God unto salvation. It's not argument. It's not philosophy. It's preaching the gospel. Jesus changes lives, and he's doing it in Sarasota, and he can do it in any city in the United States.
Well, praise the Lord. I was laughing a little bit because Godless Engineer said, LOL, why is the choice between strippers or a church? That's a question for
Jonathan, I love it.
I guess.
I agree. Hey, Godless Engineer, I agree with you, man. It shouldn't be that polarized.
No, I was trying to think of who would you rather leave your kids with, you know? And
I
that
know.
was the first thing that popped in my mind.
Derek Beeler says Chip has a great way of speaking. How can one not love this dude?
Fine. If you don't like that, I'll just say, okay, the American Atheist Society, are you going to go leave your kids with Dan Barker, where he plays Nothing Feels Like Prayer, which is the worst Calypso song in history, or are you going to go rock climbing? So if you don't like strippers, how about the Atheist Babysitter Club?
So
you're still going to go with the church. Even you would go with the church over the boring atheist with Dan Barker music in the background. You know I'm right.
So, Kate, hold on.
You asked for that one, man.
So first of all, here is me and Leighton Flowers. Chip brought me and Leighton Flowers and Jonathan down Sarasota, and there's a nice picture somewhere that I used for a thumbnail of me and Jonathan and Leighton Flowers in front of Sarasota Beach. I couldn't find that just now.
Right, so I don't get into
this. Is me and Leighton Flowers, and imagine that Jonathan is just off camera.
Imagine
that this is not the Sea of Galilee.
And imagine that's not the Jonathan you're seeing today.
Can I just say I'm thankful that you're putting that picture up rather than the strippers.
Yeah, that's right. Well, on the point of the strippers, Caitlin Chloe, who I think is Godless Engineer's wife, says strippers. She's going strippers. And then Vera says polarized. Get it? Pole. So anyway, just having some fun with the dad jokes. Yeah. Thank you for the super chat. Celebrate Humility Month. That is too big. Says I got to find a better way to do this. I'm so unprofessional. Thank you for the super chat. And that person says, hey, everyone, you have mentioned before that at minimum for a Christian, that person believes in 1 Bible, 2 Testaments, 3 creeds, and 4 councils. Are there any good books to read?
And the consensus of the first 5 centuries.
The first 5 centuries.
There is a 5-volume set. The Ancient Christian Doctrine set. It's expensive. It's even expensive on the electronic thing, but it goes through all of the theology of the Apostles' Creed. And I don't know of maybe someone in the chat, I don't know what the more accessible version of that would be. It's certainly not Al Mohler's book, The Apostles' Creed. It's not a good book. It's like in the entire bibliography, he's mostly quoting reformers. He's got like 2 or 3 entries from patristics and a book on the Apostles' Creed. And it's mostly what Calvin or Whitefield or whatever said. It's a terrible idea. But I think Michael Bird may have a book.
Pritchett, why are strippers the first thing on your mind? GE wants to know.
Huh? That's just the world and culture we live in.
And his wife.
We might need to stop and pray, right, Braxton? I could take my kids to my mom's house. Not sure why it's church or strippers. This is hilarious. Pritchett was trying to give a polarizing couple of options to test this thing at the fringes.
Right.
But
I'm fine with Barker, and I don't care what his wife is saying. They know. You ask the kids, do you want to go sit with Dan Barker or do you want to go rock climbing with the church people? Yeah,
church people.
Dan Barker's not going to go rock climbing. I'm sorry.
I was gonna jump in.
Oh, hey Chip, you're still here.
I believe there's a book by Paul Little that he wrote. What we believe and then why we believe. Those are some really super accessible books that are not 5-volume expensive sets that give you some of the fundamentals of the faith, if that's what somebody was asking.
Yeah, there you go. Now, next tough question, because I actually agree with you, because I have to admit, Chip, that I was one of those people that was at a smaller church out in Newburgh that ultimately got won over by the church I attend now, One Life, which is, I guess it's we've got 3 campuses or whatever. And so that's going to happen. But you're having baptism. So that's really the key thing, is that there are people getting saved in your church. And so
fundamentally, I don't want somebody else from somebody else's church. I love the local church, and I'm not looking to take anybody else's people. It's going to happen. People do change churches. That happens. But the goal of Grace Community Church is not to grow because we're taking somebody else's people. The goal of Grace Community Church is to reach people that are not going to church at all.
Right. But I was going to say, and a lot of what you're getting is just Christian. Now, Sarasota, I imagine it's kind of transient city. So there's always new people coming into the city, more people moving away from it, that kind of thing. Some people are seasonal. So I guess it's in that kind of situation, it's also easy for people to find a church because there's always so many new people coming in. Is that one of the things too, or?
Well, we do have a season here in Sarasota. There are a lot of second homes here in Sarasota, but there's a lot of people that live here. I think 97% of Sarasota is unchurched. So, I mean, the playing field is huge. I mean, it's huge. So, the goal, again, going back to what we do, is being involved in the community. Like for instance, July 17th, we have what's called Day of Hope. On that day, underprivileged, at-risk kids come to our church. They can get medical help. They get a haircut. They can get some food. They get an age-appropriate book bag that has all the school supplies that they need for the year in there. And we give that to them for free. And we get to serve a lunch and all that. And they get to hang out with some people that can get to know the families and partner with them and get to know them. Those are things that whether you're an atheist or whether you're a Christian, you should go, that's good stuff. I mean, like we should be able to agree there's certain things that are just good. And I think that, what we're doing is of such a great nature that it makes people interested in why do you do this? I'm probably wrong here. And somebody will probably chat in and say, this guy's wrong or whatever. But I'm not aware of the great atheist bandwagon that's going around every community and doing good for the community and feeding the poor and helping the sick and, doing all those things. That's part of what Christianity's all about. And maybe we've lost that in some ways, but that's who we should be. We shouldn't be apologetic about who we are. And so everything we do, Jonathan, is engaged on being outside of the church Monday through Saturday. Okay. But on the weekends, we try to equip the saints and try to help them understand how to be a better Christian during the week.
Awesome. So to tie all this back together, and I want to be sensitive to Pastor Chip's time here, Dr. Bennett's time, is that
I'm here for whatever. Let's go. Let's roll.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll turn it into a Q&A from this point forward. So if you all have questions, just go ahead and ask them. We've been doing that a little bit as we go on. But any questions on anything you want, just feel free to ask. And
have one more
what was the one more question?
The one more question I was going to have is, so you had mentioned deconstruction. This whole we've done several episodes recently on people deconstructing their faith or whatever. And you touched on this earlier about you telling pastors to encourage it. One of the things that is common is that they couldn't ask the questions that they wanted answers, and the church would shut it down or didn't have the information for that, and they go for those answers somewhere. So you have a PhD. But a lot of pastors don't have that level. I mean, some might have an MDiv, but even there, most pastors, I think, still don't have seminary education that are in the 300,000 some odd churches in the United States. So if they can't get their answers, their questions answered, what do you say to pastors that are in a situation where they would say, well, no, I'm not going to shut down questions, but I don't have answers?
Well, I think that Braxton early on, suggested that what you guys are doing and other people on the YouTube, it might have been you too, Jonathan, that said something about you can get as much information as you want to answer questions, from a Christian standpoint. But specifically me, what I'm trying to do to address that particular concern is the YouTube channel that we're doing, which is reaching the next generation. I'm trying to give those 300,000 pastors opportunities to get seminary level education along with practical skills, along with leaders that are giving answers so that they can get those. And it's free. I mean, we're not asking anybody to give anything. We're giving, we're giving this information. I'm doing it, on our dime. We bought the equipment. We did the stuff. I did it because I have a heart to reach people. And I can only do one thing here in Sarasota because I'm just one person. But with the internet and with the ability to get this stuff out there, I might be able to help 5, 10 pastors, maybe 20, maybe 100, who knows? And if I can help just a few, then everything that we're doing is worth it. I've always said, if only one person in the entire ministry of Grace Community Church came to know who Jesus was, then everything that we've done, every dollar that we've spent, every event that we've done is worth it. And so for me, the answer to your question is, I'm trying to give those pastors a place to go that they can get those resources, and then also be able to give them other people that they can go to. Braxton, I love you say this all the time. You don't have to be an answer giver. You just have to be an answer finder. And so for me, if I can't give the answers on reaching the next generation, I want to be able to give them the places to go so that they can get those things.
That's what all of this is about, Chip. I think it's all
totally
about providing those resources. And another thing that Chip has done classically that I bet you'd be surprised to hear of a church doing, because this doesn't happen very much, is he has, in fact, this is the first time I ever interacted with Chip, was he had me down because he does the summer academic series where on a, I don't know, Wednesday or Thursday night, he'll bring in some PhD from New Orleans Baptist Seminary or some guy who's a physicist or whatever, and bring him in and let them give a presentation, have a conversation with him, and do audience Q&A. Yeah. And I went down there with Mike Lycona. Pritchett and I have been down a couple times. By the way, I want to say this real quick. Some people are saying, are you and Pritchett in the same room? I want to show you that me and Pritchett are in the same room. Here's Han Solo. Pritchett. He didn't catch it.
I didn't catch it, but yeah.
Well, see, now he did. Yeah, if you had the Han Solo, that would be great. Here, try again, Pritchett. Catch this. He still didn't catch it. What's wrong with you? One more try. This is Michelangelo. Michelangelo.
Those things are hard plastic and to keep there.
Boom! He nailed it. Yeah. All right.
Third time's a charm. All right.
Hold it up so they know.
I did want to say, though, about this deconstructing business. Now, in a church like yours, are the small group leaders are the ones you talk about. You want your church to be open for people to have this kind of process so that they can have kind of a church to be there for them while they're going through this, and hopefully not fully deconstruct. I don't know what it's called. So are the small group leaders, are they trained to kind of watch out for people who may be having some of their doubts or these issues, or how does that work in your church?
Okay, well, I think that you have to know that culture eats vision for lunch. And so the culture of any organization or any church is important. And so, Braxton, you made the point that I've had yourself, Lycona, I've had Turek, I've had a number of people in. We've created a culture at Grace that people know it's okay to have questions. It's okay to struggle through stuff. I mean, I say many times from the pulpit that, hey, this is a view here that I have on this particular thing, but it's not the view that everybody has. And it's okay. These are not salvific issues. The way you create a culture in your church is whether or not people feel comfortable coming with those real questions and those real doubts. It starts at the top. If everything is answered and you always say, I talk with God every morning and he shines down in my bedroom and, I'm brushing my teeth and he tells me what to do in the morning, and people hear that, they think, well, man, I have no chance in the world. But as a pastor, if you get up and go, hey, listen, my life's not perfect. I got 6 kids. They wipe boogers on each other. They fight. I mean, we have difficulties in our household. But let me tell you how we've learned to work through these things. People start to go, hey, this is real. And when things are real and authentic, people feel comfortable coming to and asking these questions. Yeah. And so I think the culture thing. Yes, to answer your question,
interesting,
we do have small groups where people can answer those questions. We do have people that you can get to very quickly, and we have mentoring classes for marriage. I mean, we have like 20 mentors in our church that if you have a marriage issue, you can go meet with an older couple that's trained, and they'll help you with your marriage. If you got a problem with questions, we have people in the church that are really good at answering those questions and can help you get on board. That's the structure of our church. We want to help people.
Yeah, because your church is kind of like Trinity Seminary, kind of like our church, One Life, where we have a minimal doctrinal statement that allows for a diversity of views within the umbrella of our faculty. Same thing with the pastors at our church. I'm guessing you don't agree with everything that your associate pastors think, and they don't agree, and you allow for that.
I don't agree with everything I think every week. Sometimes I disagree with my own self.
I'm with you on that. See, I've always heard that churches and seminaries like ours are the problem, and that the more rigid your doctrinal statements are and the more confessional you are, the more you're able to maintain consistency in people's lives and all of this kind of stuff, as opposed to now. So
but I'm not a
I've
McDonald's
heard that.
franchise. I'm not a McDonald's franchise. I'm not looking to have fries the same everywhere. I'm looking to be the church, and the church is a bunch of people from a bunch of different backgrounds coming to the foot of the cross and finding their unity in Christ, not in all the other stuff.
Right, because I was thinking, how is that working for all these churches that are rigid, and the only answers that they can give are the ones that are fall within the confessions or the doctrinal statements? And I see more people coming out, whether it's the fundamentalist traditions or Reformed traditions or whatever, that have, the more rigid they are in the doctrinal statements, the less available answers they have in their arsenal to help people understand all of the issues involved.
Okay,
yeah,
so
I suspect, I don't know this, but I would say the more rigid you are, the more you're seeing people leave.
Okay, so we have several questions here from various people. But since we've been talking about Godless Engineer, let's throw his up there first. He says, question, what is the basic plan for retaining members? Now, do you want to answer that, Chip, or would you like me to talk a little bit about that? You're actually doing it.
Yeah, we're not pastors. We don't have.
I'm not a pastor. I certainly have ideas, but I'll let you take it.
Yeah, I think that you have to. I don't want to I hope this doesn't mess up your listeners, but I want to talk to it's Godless Engineer, who yes. I'm assuming is not a believer. Am I correct on that?
That's right. He's an atheist, and his name is John.
So
you can say John.
So the answer, I want to answer him specifically. I don't want to answer just generally. The answer to him is that we as a church, we fundamentally believe that what we're doing is right. And I would hope he would at least give us the credit that we would want to be doing what we think is right. Whether he agrees with what we do or not, totally different issue. But we believe that Jesus is who he says he is. We believe the church is what the church is. And so for us, it starts with, we believe that what we're doing is the best possible thing we can be doing for a community, which is to reach the community for Jesus and to do the things that we're doing. So that being said, what we want to do is we want to look at this thing holistically. We want to go, okay, do we have a way that people can enter into the church without having to go through all these hoops and all this religion? And so one of the phrases that we say is you can belong here before you believe. And we exhibit that. So we start there, and then what we do is we gradually come down the funnel to where we get people that are truly involved in the core of the church and are functioning. At every level of that funnel, there are things that are in place in our church to make sure that if you leave, or if you're not here for a couple of weeks, or if we miss you, that there's ways in which we can get in contact with you, ways that we can follow up. And the reason we do that is because we don't really want to see anybody leave. Now, we're not going to hold you hostage, but we want to make sure that if you come to Grace, that somebody's concerned about you and thinks about you. And typically there is some sort of way all the way down that funnel that we're able to reach out to people and help them. Now, does that mean that there's nobody that ever leaves Grace? No, there's people that leave Grace, period, end of story. I know there, but it's a fewer amount of people than you would find in maybe most large churches like we are. And it's because we seriously take what we do as the highest stakes game in town. And so at every level of participation, whether it's the crowd, whether it's the congregation, or whether it's the core, we know sort of how to reach out to those people and how to keep in touch with those people, so that, and they know that we care, they know that we love them, and so they're more inclined to tell us what's going on. And that's how we shut what's the proverbial back door. And I hope that helps in some way answer Godless Engineer's question.
And Chip, as an outsider looking in and having been at your church quite a bit, I can say that there's other things. For example, Chip includes academic material and apologetics in his preaching on occasion. It's clear what to, or at least it can be made clear what to do if you're doubting. I really think that's a big thing. I think if churches would just make it clear to people that go there on the screens and the literature, if I'm experiencing worldview doubt, not doubt about my salvation or doubt, those are important too to address differently. But worldview, intellectual doubt, is there a place to go with that? Because, John, what we see from like the Journal for the Scientific Study of Religion, what we found is when people don't have a group to go to, when they're bothered at church or doubting, or someone's upset them at church and they don't have a group to connect with, that can kind of come around them and love on them and provide them. You say, well, but that's more than just providing apologetics. That's like what the church wrapping around people. That sounds like indoctrination. Well, we don't think of it as indoctrination. We think of it as loving on them and being, you might call that love bombing them, but not if it's genuine. And here's the thing. I agree that it's not just apologetics, because I don't think anyone ever makes major worldview decisions just because of the evidence. Even in your video response to me, John, one time I remember you saying, yeah, it could be that some particular issue serves as a catalyst to get someone to look at the evidence. So what this does is, number one, you got a pastor who's mixing it in, which is better than 90% of what's out there. Next, you got a pathway. What do I do if I'm experiencing doubt? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? Third, you've got a world-class, first-class resource that this pastor is building in terms of a channel with voices on there that some of which you've heard of, like me and Jonathan and John McCrae and Frank Turek and people like that. But another part of this that he kind of tees us up for is there is an event, and I can't say too much about it, but there is an event that's going to happen related to this, to reaching the next generation, Grace Community Church, and it's going to happen hopefully next year, and hopefully will happen indefinitely after that every year. And it is going to involve some of the big names, not just in apologetics, big names in the world of apologetics, but also there is a particular pastor. I wish I could tell you his name, that the goal is to get him involved. And he has been at One Life, that's my church, at Grace before. And if they get him, it's going to be huge. I mean, this thing is the package. So ultimately, people have free will, in my opinion, and they can choose that come hell or high water, like literally, I'm going to walk away from this church. That can happen, but we're going to give you every help we can.
It would be hard to walk away from Grace without feeling like we did everything that we could to keep you from leaving.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of questions here from Capturing Christianity. First of all, Cameron says, why does Braxton's setup look so much better than Jonathan's?
Because this is his office. Of course it does.
And Miguel Benitez says, love what Chip is doing in Southwest Florida. Exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Gregory Fisher said about something you said, Chip. Whoa, that was a powerful statement about culture and vision. Punchbowl Haircut says, did anyone play Turok Dinosaur Hunter for Nintendo 64? Yes. What do you think we did in between playing lengthy rounds of 007 GoldenEye? And lastly, let's see. Capturing Christianity has given a super chat. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Cameron. And asks the question from Capturing Christianity, Braxton, does Chip know about your upcoming debate? I'd be curious to hear any advice he has for you. Do you know about my
Are you Cosmic Skeptic?
Yeah, Alex O'Connor, Cosmic Skeptic. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a very unique individual. I'm not as familiar probably with him as you all are. But he's a very gifted young man. It appears very intellectual. I mean, Braxton, you're good at what you do, man. I think that you just got to do what you do and be who you are. The facts are the facts. The truth is the truth. My concern always is when we debate somebody is how we look. Do we come across as looking like we're pointing fingers and mean-spirited, or do we look like we're charitable and actually you're giving somebody else the ear to listen to where they're coming from to answer those questions? Those are my advices as a pastor, is just, be loving and, kind, but, go after it. I mean, get after it. I think that the truth is on our side.
Well, I appreciate that, brother. And thank you for that super chat, Cameron. And one more before I think Jonathan has something he wants to say. I'll put this up here. Finding Truth, who's got a great YouTube channel on his own. You ought to go check him out. Great interviews there. And thank you for that super chat. He says, for Dr. Bennett, apart from having a second campus, what is your philosophy for church planting, supporting, or sending?
We have not been a part of a church planting or sending other than some of the missionary work that we've done. We have a couple that's in the Philippines, Becky and Juno Yamato. She's a doctor, pediatrician, and Juno is a church planner. We do support them, and they basically do in the Philippines what we do here in Sarasota. They have a very robust outreach in terms of planning a church or starting, something else. I never intended Braxton to have two campuses. I'm like an old-fashioned guy. I wanted to be a pastor of one church. I didn't want to be a part of going back and forth. I drive between the two. We haven't even done video really well, and I don't really want to do video. Not that it's bad. I'm just sort of an old-fashioned guy. But if we were going to plan a church, my philosophy would be that we would, try to find someone that felt called to a particular place and would want to make sure that they understood that place and what the needs were, and try to resource people within that community that would be a part of that church plant. Because you can't just go. I would say that we would start there and and build from that. I could probably go more into that, but I think that's probably the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, we have a super chat that I missed apparently from Derek Beeler. He's one of our regular supporters. He says, do you find importance at all in combating Christians falling into New Age or evangelizing New Agers? If so, what moves are you or should you make? That's Derek.
Yeah, Derek, to answer your question, I think that all of us have a contextual ministry, and I tend to be trying to speak into and answer and deal with the situations that are going on in Sarasota. I don't particularly have a ton of New Age stuff going on here in Sarasota. My biggest problem in Sarasota is affluenza, where people are just very, very wealthy and don't see their need for God. And so, we're speaking into those things. If I did have a lot of New Age stuff, then, I would address those things. But me personally, I don't have a lot of that in the ministry at Grace. So I would punt that back to you, Jonathan and Braxton. You all are the best at these types of things. Maybe you can answer that question better than I can.
There's actually we read it on Trinity Radio several Christmases back. I don't even know if we had video yet, but there was a lost article that C.S. Lewis wrote for a local newspaper in which he was talking about, it was something to do with the idea of if you have pagans, and actually we did earlier have a pagan, Ocean Keltoy in the chat. I don't know if he's still there or not. We have a legit polytheist pagan in the chat, but C.S. Lewis was saying, like, if you have a pagan, pagans are easier to evangelize, basically was his point, because paganism is like this beautiful field with rocks and things. Nothing's been growing there, but it's ready for things to grow there. And he primarily says that because the supernatural, like they don't have a problem with the supernatural. They don't have a problem with that sort of thing. So they're kind of already set up for it. Whereas with naturalism, what you have is more like a building that's been torn down in a city, and there's just rubble there, and you can't get anything to grow. And so from that perspective, you may have better chance with a New Ager than you would with a naturalist. And I think the way you do that is again to chat with them, to talk to them about how do they answer the major questions of life? How do we get here? What's the meaning of life? What happens if when we die? And you get a beat on what their worldview is. You ask them, is it all right with you if I share with you what Christianity says? And you do a worldview discussion there, worldview comparison. And like Chip says, that could sound very intimidating. But like Chip said a while ago, I always say, you may not be able to be the answer giver yet, but you can be the answer finder. So start a conversation with a new ager or someone like that. And if they ask a question you don't know the answer to, then you say, hey, can we continue this conversation later and I'll go find the answer to that question. So I think that works out really, really well. Dr. Chip Bennett. What in the world, Dr. Chip Bennett? Thank you for that substantial super chat.
Yeah, and I said, go Braxton. So
I appreciate that. Pritchett's like, well, where am I? He's talking about the debate, Pritchett.
Oh.
Okay.
That's funny.
Well, I'll tell you what. I feel like we've had a good discussion.
Yeah.
We could go all day. That's how these things always are. We could go all day, but there's no reason to do that.
No, we can't go all day. Mike Winger's
going to come up at 3:00 and he'll take away our audience. So, I
want to close kind of for Chip. If you could just given our culture, but given your experience with these nuns and duns and people dealing with deacons, what is your word of hope to pastors? Because we do have pastors who watch and other people in ministry that are involved in their local church. What's the hope that they have that even though it seems like the numbers for Christianity is going down, the numbers of disinterested people for whatever reason is going up. So what is the hope that you can give them if they want to see something, if not just national numbers change for their local communities where they're at? What's the hope?
I think the hope is this. The Lord loves his church more than any of us pastors ever will. And he's going to be faithful to his church. And if we go back and study church history, the church has had good times and the church has had bad times from what we consider to be like a worldly success type of situation. God has never given up on his church. He never is going to give up on his church. I think we as pastors, we just have to figure out what exactly it is that we should be doing. I think there's a lot of pastors in America, and they may not want to hear this, but I really mean this from the bottom of my heart. A lot of small churches might want to consider how they can merge or work with other churches to steward the resources that they have to better effectively reach the kingdom. We took one of the campuses that we have. There was less than 100 people going to that church, and it sat 1,100 people. It was hard for them to merge with us and give what they had for years to another church. But you know what? That church is filled up with people now. And that's the church that just baptized 25, 30 people, and they hadn't baptized people in 10 years. And so, the church is not going to go away. I think what we got to do is find ways to be incredibly resourceful with what God has given us to steward. And I think if all the pastors in America would work that way, I think that we would find that the church is still a great place. It's still the greatest institution in the world. And, if you're a pastor or a teacher right now and you're watching and maybe you're down and out, maybe you're in the dumps, can I just give you a positive word? I mean, God loves his church. God loves you. God hasn't given up on his plan and calling that he gave to you. And maybe this is something that you need to hear right now, that, the church is going to be victorious. The gates of hell are not going to prevail. And we have a bright future to look forward to, not only in this world, but more so in the world to come. And ultimately, that's where the Christian hope comes from, Jonathan. It doesn't come from this world. It comes from the fact that we believe in a heavenly city whose builder and maker is God, and we believe that that is what we're playing for. And so everything we do in ministry, every sermon that we preach, every outreach ministry that we do, it is the highest stakes game in town because we're playing for a completely different city and a completely different world, which is the world that's coming.
Amen, Chip. Amen. And Chip, I want to say, you reminded me there to say, I want everyone to know. So in the description, I didn't have it in there before we started the video because I wanted you all to be introduced to him fresh. But I have in the description now a link to their channel right at the top. So it may not be there now because you came here before I put it in, but when we get done, just refresh the page, hit that link, and subscribe to Reaching the Next Generation. It's called Reaching the Next Generation. You want to be there for that? Man, listen, Jonathan Pritchett today and John McCrae pretty soon. You want to see John McCrae. You want to be there for Jonathan Pritchett. So both of those guys are going to be great. So you want to check that out, and everything else that Dr. Bennett has, great resources there. And he is a part of, this is what I want people to get from this channel, okay? It's about evangelism for us. It's about reaching people for the Lord Jesus Christ. So what me and Jonathan are interested in is not just having a channel on YouTube for a hobby. We're interested in, okay, there's a problem. How are we going to fix this problem? The response videos are part of that because we want a response video for every atheist video on the internet, which will never be achieved, but will always be approaching, but never arriving at that infinite. So we'll be doing that. This that Chip is doing is a big piece of the puzzle that we couldn't have done that he's doing for us. And so I want you to, my desire for you, if you're interested at all in what we think at Trinity Radio, is my desire for you is that you pay attention to resources like this that are actually doing something. And with that, Pritchett, do you have anything else you want to say before we go?
Nope.
Chip, Pastor, Dr. Bennett, thank you so much. You stay with me, and but in just a moment, we're gonna close this out, and we'll say bye to everyone else. But thank you all for being here. Thank you for the super chats. It's meant so much. This has been a blast, and we'll see you next time on Trinity Radio.